2016 NFL Draft just getting underway here in about 3 hours. Now joining me here is Lane Adkins of the Orange and Brown Report on Scout.com. Draft day finally here. Sashi Brown seems like he's excited about it. Hugh Jackson seems ready to get on a roll. Another new regime claiming it can clean things up in Berea. Lane, do you think the organization gets things back on the right track tonight?
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Davies. How are you?
I'm doing great, man.
There is a definite change in the feel within that organization, within that building. There's confidence. There's professionalism. There's a composure about these guys that it's felt from the upper levels of the organization all the way through that there is change, and it's occurring in Cleveland. It's going to be interesting to see when these guys get on the clock, when the pressure's on, to see what they do.
Yeah, for sure. Sashi did say Monday that he already knows who the Browns are taking at 8. Is that smart to say on his part, and is there truth to that in your eyes?
Well, it is silly season, as they call it. Well, it really doesn't hurt to say it because, 32 teams in this league, and there's an element of smoke being blown everywhere. I mean, sure, the Browns know who they would like to optimally select at number 8. From our understanding, there's a couple guys that they really would like to look at there. And they know that if the right guys fall on the board, if the draft goes their way, sitting at 8, there's going to be an opportunity to trade that pick if they really desire to do that. It's going to be an interesting evening.
Yeah, okay. If they do stick at 8, though, who do you think that they would take at that spot? Because there's a lot of people talking about Joey Bosa. There's some talking about DeForest Buckner. Ezekiel Elliott's another name that's come up. What do you think?
I think it's how this board is going to fall. One of those guys will be sitting there at 8 for them. I'd be surprised if there's 2 of them sitting there for them to select from. But I think one of those guys that you named, Zeke Elliott, Joey Bosa, DeForest Buckner, one of those guys will be sitting there. And those guys are all guys that have been rated very highly on the Browns draft board. Players of great interest and potential impact to a team, especially like the Browns.
What about Miles Jack? You obviously seen he's had, they said he has to have microfracture surgery or something on his knee as a possibility, I think is what he said. Is that someone you could see them looking at?
Sometimes a player talks a little too much, and that's something he really didn't need to get into. Miles Jack, I think, is going to be a fabulous player, but, coming off the ACL and, he's got the degenerative issues with the meniscus, cartilage in the knee. He's a guy that you look at and say, okay, the likelihood of his career being shortened is already increased probably by at least 25%. Pre-knee, people loved him. After the ACL, people thought he was still going to be an outstanding talent. And then you get further into the medicals and find out, other than the ACL, he's got the cartilage issue and everything. I don't see the Browns taking a chance on him at 8. They're in a position where they have to secure talent that's going to get on the field here and play. And as much as I like Miles Jack as a prospect, I have definite concerns about his longevity in the NFL.
Yeah, and that could make him really drop a little further than he wants to. But we were talking about possible trading down earlier. Those teams have interest in Ezekiel Elliott. Do you think that that's going to get done tonight, or do you think that they're going to end up staying at 8?
I think it really is going to depend on who slides down or is sitting there at 8 for him. If it's Ezekiel Elliott, Miami is going to be interested. Miami loves him. I think that really is going to come down to is if the Browns are overwhelmed in an offer of comparable value when looking at how they rate Ezekiel Elliott, which I know he is rated highly. They like the idea of it, the ability to run the football, control the football with him, which is going to provide security and enable Robert Griffin in the backfield. It's a tough call when you get to Zeke because, he is one guy with a lot of potential that NFL teams see as a difference maker at this level, even at a running back.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, for one, I'm a huge fan of Ezekiel Elliott. I think he could be the best offensive playmaker in this draft right now, and even with so many other needs that you have, I think if he's there, you can't pass him up. I know there's a lot of speculation out there that the Cowboys could take him at 4, but if he falls to you, I think that they have to take Ezekiel Elliott just because of his playmaking ability, his ability to block, catch out of the backfield, and like you said, he's electric. So if he's there at 8, is that a mistake if they don't take him?
If I was sitting there turning that card in, I'd be taking him at 8 without a question. I think he's just a dynamic presence, dynamic personality, a guy who can do everything, is going to make you a better football team the first time he slips on that uniform. He's a hard guy to pass on.
Oh, no doubt, for sure. Okay, but say they do end up trading down, those potential targets, Laquan Treadwell, a name that's generated a lot of buzz, Josh Doxson from TCU's another one. It depends, obviously, on where they trade down to if it happens, but who do the Browns target in that 12 to late teens range if they do end up moving down?
Well, they drop down into that area. You have to look at the wide receivers because at some point in that area, maybe not far after that, you're going to see receivers start coming off the board and you're going to get a run on them. And if you're really targeting wide receiver, which I believe this organization has spent an enormous amount of time evaluating just due to the need, and if you look at the depth chart, it'll scream at you why. Laquan Treadwell, he's not the fastest guy. I mean, he runs a 4.6, but he's exceptional in that first 10 yards. He gets out. He's a big body. He just beats people to the ball, outfights them. Great positioning. Wins the 50-50 battles. He dropped more passes in 2015 than he did at any other time during his career, which opened up some people's eyes of questioning. Some of that people believe was him coming off injury and just having not as focused as he should have been. You want a big receiver, which Hugh Jackson likes. You look at Treadwell. I mean, but you can also look at a guy like Corey Coleman and Josh Doxson, who are just dynamic type guys when they get the ball in their hands. Doxson's just tremendous hands, makes crazy catches. And Corey Coleman's a guy that he's accelerating at full speed in one step, and it's just a yardage after catch type receiver who can just make play after play, but questions with his hands. Those are the three guys that I immediately look at when I talk about and see what the Browns can do to help themselves spread the field a little bit.
Lane Adkins of the OBR on Scout.com joining us. Moving on to number 32, another potential trade chip, an asset that Cleveland has. It's basically another first-round draft pick. We talked about wideouts, but if Michael Thomas is there at number 32, that's also a match made in heaven, isn't it?
Yeah, they like Michael Thomas. They like the size. Not the fastest guy, not the quickest guy. A bigger body, knows how to play the game, knows how to run routes. It's going to be interesting sitting at 32 because there's going to be a lot of interest in that pick just being the first pick in the second round when you got guys that are projected in the first that slide down a little bit. It's going to be a position where the Browns are going to have a lot of opportunity to make something happen. And, with the draft picks that they've accumulated, especially with that trade with Philadelphia getting out of number 2, I wouldn't completely put it past them to sniff around back into the later first round if there's a guy on the board that they really like. But right now, I think they're sticking at 32.
Say they do move up into that first round in the late 20s or something like that. Who do you think that they'd be looking at then?
Oh, it's going to be interesting. It's really going to come down to what they do with that 8th pick. I mean, if they trade down and they grab a wide receiver at 13, 15 in that area, the likelihood of them going wide receiver again, backing that up at 32 or trading back up is unlikely, especially in a trade-up. A guy to keep an eye on that defensive coordinator Ray Horton really likes is West Virginia safety Carl Joseph. I think he's going to be a dynamic and Earl Thomas type at a position that this Browns have question marks at. So that's a guy I would look at, and I still don't discount them looking at a quarterback at some point. I'm just not sure that 32 is where it's going to be, though.
Right. And we've been hearing a lot here in the past 24, 48 hours about Connor Cook being a possible target in either the second or third round. Is that someone, do you think they're looking at? I, for one, not too big of a fan, but he is a very tough kid, and he displayed a lot of grit and toughness at Michigan State. So what do you think about the possibility of Connor Cook coming here?
I wouldn't discount it. They spent a lot of time investigating and talking to him, and they talked to guys at Michigan State, they talked to coaches, they talked to players. They sat in on Connor Cook and discussed with him. There's questions about his personality on how he is or what makes him tick. But when you look at him as a football player and on-field production coming to the professional level, where you got guys such as Hugh Jackson, Pep Hamilton, and even Al Saunders, the wide receiver coach who has a coaching background with quarterbacks and offensive coordinating, that, if they're comfortable knowing that this is a guy that they see the tools and the skill set with that they can get to, then it's a comfort pick because he is a talented individual.
With LA trading up to number one with the Titans and Cleveland trading down with the Eagles, they obviously didn't covet Carson Wentz too much this year, or else they wouldn't have made that move. That being said, they brought in Robert Griffin III this year. They've still got Josh McCown. As far as depth, I believe they still have Austin Davis and Connor Shaw's returning from injury. Is there really a need to take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds for the Browns?
The immediate necessity is no. Getting a guy that you want under your wing to, develop, take the time, sit him on the bench, bring him along. If you see a special type of talent that you see, then, it's something that you strongly consider because, especially with a head coach, you want your guy. It's just the way it is. I mean, they went out, they got Robert Griffin, and Hugh Jackson wanted him. That's the reason why he's in Cleveland is because of Hugh Jackson. So you could say that Hugh's already got his guy. We're talking about, is Robert Griffin going to be a reclamation project? I mean, we don't know what he's going to be. Being said, if there's a quarterback of value sitting there when you're on the clock, it makes sense to take him. It's just that with the Browns, with the necessities, how they're looking to stabilize this roster in other areas, it doesn't just necessarily scream that you have to grab the quarterback just because he's a quarterback.
All right, last one. Something that's really irked me in this NFL draft overall is the overview of Ohio State players. There's no middle of the spectrum. It's either you're a complete homer and want every Buckeye in the draft, or you don't want anything to do with OSU at all. Now, it's understandable that some want Cleveland to avoid drafting a Buckeye or two because it's just an Ohio thing. But then when you're looking at this draft class, there's realistically 6 to 8 guys that could go in this first round, in my opinion, similar to Alabama a few years ago. To me, if you're going to make the argument that you don't want Ohio State players just because they're from that school, it's ridiculous to me. What's your stance on that?
If you're sitting here making that stance because they're Ohio State players, then you don't need to be doing this as a profession because this draft is loaded with talent, and it has Ohio State written all over it. And that's just the way it is with Urban Meyer down there in Columbus and what he's putting together. He's going to continue to bring in these kids. They're going to shine at that level. And they're going to be guys that are going to be noticed and taken in the first 1, 2, and 3 rounds. It's just the way it is. They're just athletic, and they're well coached. I mean, you look at it. Joey Bosa's going to go early. Zeke's going to go early. You got Darren Lee. Washington's going to go in the first 3 rounds. It's just an endless cycle of talent. And anybody to ignore the fact that the Ohio State University is putting out some quality players shouldn't be in this profession.
I got to agree with you there, and hopefully see the Browns at least try to inquire about a Buckeye. I don't think they've taken one since Brian Robisky, if I'm not mistaken.
No, and the interesting thing is that if you go 2.5 miles away from Cleveland and Pittsburgh, that's a pipeline from Ohio State over there. Makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does. Lane, thanks so much for joining me here. Good luck to you in your coverage of the draft. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. You can read all of his stuff on scout.com. Does an excellent job for the Orange and Brown Report. Lane, thanks again, man.
Anytime, my man. Take care.
Who will the Browns take tonight? Will they trade down? Will they stand pat? We'll find out in about less than 3 hours. Thanks for listening.